welcome to another edition of Carnivore Bites. I'm your host, Jeff Sherman, along with Dr. Eric Lopkin. An eventful week, and that's been going on for quite a while now. The first and probably the most salient issue and ongoing is the, if you will, media reckoning regarding Twitter censorship and a central figures, I would say, Mr. Baker, ex FBI person operative, who just happened to come along or basically join Twitter. Recently, has now been fired by Elon Musk. But it's overall the bigger issue, and I think you'll agree with this, Dr. Lopkin, is the whole media, now the media reckoning about their willing complicity in a active cover up before the 2020 election. What are your thoughts?
Well, I find it interesting how little coverage what's
Oh,
going on
zero.
with
There's
Twitter
like
is
zero.
getting. Yeah, I
Besides
think
Fox and maybe Newsmax, but CNN. And you think, or well, I'll ask you: are they embarrassed, or they're just, continuing on the old party line? I think it's a combination of both.
I think you're right. I think it is a combination. But the problem is this issue is much bigger than even the media thinks. Because the little coverage that it has been getting are liberal pundits saying, well, it's not really about the First Amendment because Twitter's a was a public company and it wasn't, the government that was doing it. Really, the FBI is not a government agency according to these pundits?
100%. It's called useful amnesia. It's obviously, yes, the FBI was directly involved with, yes, a public company, but still, they, and they knowingly said this, knew this, that it wasn't Russian disinformation, but yet they perpetuated that lie for their own political ideological bent
And again, it's bigger
and
than
interest.
that because James Baker, who was the chief attorney at Twitter,
Hmm.
first of all, he tried to redact what Elon Musk was releasing without consulting Elon Musk. Because, of course, he's trying to cover his own ass.
Hmm.
But you need to go back even further because prior to being at Twitter, James Baker was an attorney for the FBI. And not just an attorney, he was one of the attorneys involved in lying to the FISA court for a warrant about the Steele dossier. So this whole thing comes full circle.
Just a
This
coincidence, Dr.
Yeah,
Lockton?
this was an active FBI attempt to rig not just one election, but two, 2016 and 2020.
So let me ask you, I agree with that obviously 100%. What were they so afraid of? And what is going on here? Is it that the institutions of the of Washington or the Beltway are scared of any outsider, or is it has it been that they now are beholden to the Democratic Party, or is it a combination of both, or is it that this Trump was such an outlander that it scared the shit out of the swamp, if you will, the establishment?
Honestly, I think it has more to do with Washington institutions now being in the pocket of the DNC. Because when you're looking at the FBI as a political machine. Remember, it was Obama that politicized these institutions. And he didn't care about outsiders. He was, trying to essentially remake the Democratic Party in his own image, which he did actually a really good job because now we've got these left left leaning squad members who they're doing exactly what Obama wanted. But it wasn't just the FBI. Because again, if you remember back during the Obama administration, he weaponized the IRS to go after conservatives. He weaponized the NSA to hack into Angela Merkel's cell phone. He made the government agencies his tools of, his weapons of mass destruction.
Does it kind of just tie in either directly or indirectly to his whole basically career life as being a essentially community organizer, being in the terms of pitting one against the other. I mean, that's his, and is also his natural natural leadings in terms of his ideology, where he went to church, all that stuff. But the community organizer, I think that plays a role, not maybe the role, but a factor in all of this, don't you think?
I think it is a factor because,
Not the
again,
factor, a
uh,
factor.
no, yeah, it's not the factor, but it is a factor. Because as a community organizer, he was organizing one group against another. And
Exactly.
that's exactly what he did as president. I mean, and remember Michelle Obama's famous quote, how this was the first time she was proud of America.
Hmm.
Really? Her husband was turning it into a totalitarian state with the IRS surveilling. And now a story just came out. The US Postal Service has been acting as a surveillance tool for the Democrats.
How do
So
they do that?
they have their own law enforcement section. And apparently, now I haven't gotten all of the details yet, but that section does a lot on the internet to track interstate commerce fraud.
That would make sense. Yeah.
Well, apparently, elements within this organization were basically doing the same thing as the IRS did, the FBI, and targeting conservatives.
Well, you would have to say, even though Obama was a less than stellar president on policy, foreign policy, economic, he was quite effective, like he said, fundamentally changing America. He accomplished that, did he not?
He did, and unfortunately, now we're all paying the price.
Again, no one reports that though, do they? And let me just say another thing is the greatest salesman of all time. He looks like this jovial, nice, compassionate guy, and behind the scenes, he was a real SOB. I mean,
Oh,
he
yeah.
looked Trump right in the face. Basically, I'm here to help. Meanwhile, he's spying on him, almost a sociopath.
Right, and that's another aspect of this is we know the Obama administration was involved in spying on the Trump campaign, again, from the phony Steele dossier, and it all ties together through James Baker.
So, is it really coincidence that he just happened to find himself employed by Twitter? I think not.
Oh, absolutely not.
There
That
you
was
go.
no coincidence.
Yeah, it's like the stars align. Yeah, it's just a coincidence. I doubt that very much. But it is interesting. I think it has huge. I think basically Elon Musk went from being one of the darlings of the liberal intelligentsia. He could be more hated than Trump at this point, as Trump, which is our next issue, fades to some degree to irrelevance,
Well, Trump just can't seem to
comparative
open.
irrelevance. I will
Yeah,
say that.
Trump can't seem to open his mouth without sticking his foot in it. Um, this whole thing that came out with Twitter could have been Trump's redemption had Trump shut the hell up. But no, he has to make an this one what could it be the stupidest thing he's ever said. And we were talking on last week's podcast about whether Kanye West was the straw that broke the camel's back with Donald Trump. My God, he topped that when he suggested that the Constitution should be rolled back and he should be reinstated as president. This not only did this alienate at least half of the Republican Party, but even his diehard supporters are going, "Oh, yeah, no, we." Yeah.
Oh, no, I think he's become seriously unglued. He's shown and I think everything. I think being persecuted, just under scrutiny for so long. I think it finally got to him, and he's becoming unglued. That statement, many political pundits believe that that is a ticking time bomb on the deaths of every Republican. Maybe that's a little dramatic. It certainly doesn't help. And speaking of not helping, he completely screwed up the midterm elections, especially the senatorial contest. We could easily be sitting, that is the Republicans, on a 51 seat majority. But who does he put in? Dr. Oz, the worst possible candidate ever in Pennsylvania, losing to a mental midget. Okay, and then you have Herschel, who can't string together three coherent sentences, loses to basically a scam artist and a wife beater or abuser, at least.
Yeah,
How do you like that?
I
That's
think
real. I think that, on top of the constitutional comments, there's so many straws right now. I think the back is broken. That's
it
what the
is
real
broken. I
is.
think
It not, or am I incorrect?
oh no, he's done.
It's
He
over.
he's if he makes it to the primaries,
If
if there's no way he is going to survive the primaries. And the
Wait, can I
Washington
interject
Post,
something? Because I think what you just said is extremely important, and we talked about it last podcast. Um, yes, you know, before it was just a theoretical scenario. I mean, there's a chance he may not make it to the primary, and if he does, I think he could be a one and done. But the only question is, does he have a scorched earth policy, which I believe he will, or does he go as one of the team players? I think not.
I don't think he'll go as a team player. If you remember during the 2016 primaries, the Republican Party made this big show of unity saying they would support whoever won the primaries. And Trump did not go along with this. And several others said, "Well, we'll do it except for Trump." So I don't think there's going to be any party unity.
Does
The
he
best
file
bet
for
the
an independent
Republicans
run?
I don't think so.
Why not? Because
His
I mean, his ego is actually going to let him, basically
it's
now he's
got
going to be a two-time loser.
it's got
Two-time
nothing
loser. He lost to
it's
someone
got
with a
nothing to
brain
do with
like
his ego.
it's got jello, and then he loses before he even gets to the plate.
It's got nothing to do with ego. It has to do with financial backing. He's already losing Republican backers.
Oh, he's hemorrhaging.
As an independent, he wouldn't have any of them. But his machine is primarily the Republican machine. If he goes into the primaries and then suddenly goes, okay, I'm going to be an independent, as an independent, he has to go into every state and get on the ballot. He's not going to have the financial backing to do it. He's not going to have the manpower to do it. He may want to file as an independent and throw a monkey wrench into the Republicans' plans, but he's not going to have the resources, especially now that the Trump organization is under scrutiny after being found guilty of tax fraud.
Yeah, more than scrutiny. Yeah, that's. I mean, he's got so much baggage. It makes a Samsonite convention look like a joke. I mean, I don't see any daylight. I think his sex appeal, his media shine is just. I just he's not the same guy. It's like having I don't know a star pitcher and they get injured like Tommy John. He's not throwing 100-mile-an-hour fastballs anymore. I believe the only question is, does he really make it to the primary? Um, I don't know. What do you think, Dr. Lopkin? That's a real issue. That's a real question. It's two
It is.
years,
I'm not sure. Yeah, we're again
a
we're
year
almost
away.
2 years. Yeah, we're a year and a half, however you want to calculate it. It is a long time, and let's not forget that at this point in previous elections, you know, in 2008, Obama wasn't running yet at this point. Going back to 92, Clinton wasn't running yet at this point. So it's really early to say who's going to be front runners and who's going to be running. I don't know if he's going to be able to make it. The fact of the matter is, as more and more financial backers walk away from him, I think he's going to find it harder and harder to put the resources together.
I think that is correct. I believe that here. How do you like this theory? I think yes, he had some issues before. January 6th is a huge one. You can argue if it was an insurrection or not. Total, again, the whole category of lack of judgment. I think that certainly suffices. But I think the rubber meeting the road is the horror, his failures in the midterms. That really says his demise has legs. It has credibility. People can talk in a vacuum about is he over. I think other people, their senatorial leaders, said that he's a declining brand. That's been touted about. But I think until the midterms, I think that was his Waterloo. And then coupled with that is Conway West and the Nazi. Let's just have them for dinner guests, and then the whole announcement about the Constitution should be basically blown up for his being reinstated. It's just you can't you no human being on earth can screw up as bad as he's done in the last 6 months. Is that not correct, Dr. Lopkin?
I
It's
don't know that
beyond human capabilities to
I
F it
don't
up so much.
I don't know if it's beyond human capabilities because, quite frankly, I'm seeing a lot of parallels between him and Hillary Clinton.
True.
Because
Yes. Good one, Lopkin. Yes.
because let's
True.
we've talked about this with 2016. Had Hillary gone away, she would and not not been in everybody's face, she might have done better in 2016. But she's one of those people that the more you see her, the less you like her.
Hmm.
With Trump, it's the same thing. If he had gone away and stopped making these ridiculous pronouncements, he might not be as done as he is now. But I think a big part of it is, you said, his declining brand. Well, his brand is completely different now. In 2016, we were coming out of the Obama administration, which, as we said, was essentially Big Brother.
Hmm.
Compared to this, now you've got Donald Trump coming in.
Oh, well, let me
He's in
interject one thing. No, hold on. Let me interject one thing. It was not only Big Brother, but it was American mediocrity. And then you had this person saying, no, we're going to win again. That's also a factor. Go
Yes,
ahead, sir.
he came in saying, we're going to make America great again. He was an outsider. He was bombastic. He was everything Obama wasn't. And
Hmm.
the election of Donald Trump, more than an endorsement of Trump himself, was a repudiation of the Obama
No
administration.
doubt.
And in fact, Obama campaigned on that, saying, if you don't vote for Hillary Clinton, you're voting against my legacy. Well, that's exactly what people were doing. But then, and of course, you saw Obama poisoned the well immediately with the FISA warrant, the spying on the Trump campaign. But the mainstream media was complicit. So they poo pooed the idea. Oh, he's crazy. That never happened. And now, of course, now we're seeing, yes, it all happened. It was all involved with the same group of people, from Twitter to, to the Steele dossier. It was all, you know, I don't know, I wouldn't say coordinated, but it was the same people over and over again trying to do this. And now you saw Trump as the reality TV star that he was. It's the guy from The Apprentice who's, yeah, he's got great ideas, but he doesn't know how to govern. So you take.
But then there's also a factor of he is also becoming increasingly unglued. That cannot be understated. I mean, the the whole thing, you reversing the Constitution, the Conway West, and then also his performance. I think the performance in the midterms was huge. That gave credibility to the concept and the theory of declining brand.
Well, again, I think declining brand is a misnomer. That's what I'm getting at. The brand that people voted for in 2016 is a different brand than he is now. Now, after being president for 4 years, showing he doesn't, have what it takes to form consensuses and actually govern, that he showed he was not up to the constant pressure that he was under, the barrage of the attacks. He was unable
He
to
actually,
say,
and he
okay,
also put fuel on that fire.
yes, because he took everything personally and struck back. Now, you know, we have in the Exvadio network, we have a sister podcast called The Success Showcase. We talk a lot about mindset on that. And one of the big things that we've talked about on that is that when something happens, the most important thing you can do is not react. Step back, take a breath, and figure out what needs to be done. Trump never did that. He always had the knee jerk reaction, the name calling. He never took that breath to go, okay, how can I successfully deflect this attack? How can I show what's really behind it? He never did that. He just reacted.
And
And
by reacting like you've just articulated, he reinforced the narrative instead of
yes,
reversing the narrative.
exactly.
So we do agree that I'd say, I don't think I think he might make it to the primaries. I really don't see it. And I wouldn't have said this a month ago. I just don't see it happening. I think he'll maybe take his ball and go home and have a little hissy fit and try to throw a monkey wrench. Don't see him really as a viable candidate for so many reasons. And I think he's actually come unglued. His judgment, like you said, during his presidency and then post presidency, starting with January 6th, and then his performance in the midterms all come together to spell later dude. Any
Well, yeah,
final thoughts?
I think it's all part of the same thing. His performance in the midterms is primarily because instead of endorsing candidates that would be good for the Republican Party, that would be good for America, he endorsed people that stood by him. It was all about personal loyalty with him rather than who was going to do a good
A
job.
hundred
And
percent correct.
that's what killed the Republicans in the midterms.
And payback's a bitch. There is, let's just say the RNC. There is powers behind the curtain that now the knives are out. I think we've talked about that before, but there never was love lost between him and the Republican establishment, but they both needed each other. Now he's disposable.
Exactly. And but we're also seeing there may be changes to the Republican establishment because it came out earlier today. I'm blanking on the name of the current head of the RNC,
The
but
woman, right?
yes,
Yeah,
but
I don't recall either.
it's turning out she may be challenged for leadership by Lee Zeldin.
Oh, no, Zeldin bowed out. He just bowed out.
Oh, he did. Okay,
Yeah, but your concept, your theory is right on board. I think it's like a Stalinistic cleansing. I think anyone that's a Trumper is now vulnerable. Do you agree?
absolutely.
Well, moving on. Speaking of being vulnerable, the Hunter Biden. How do you think this all plays out over the next 6 months? We got the Twitter situation. We have a changing of the guard in the House. I think he becomes. I'm really looking forward to how this all plays out. I mean, Biden. He's a perpetual liar, but he lied to the he knew nothing about his business. All that's going to come home to roost. But the real question, Dr. Lopkin, and one for you to answer is how does this play out both overall politically and for Biden in particular?
Well, it's not going to play out well for Biden, and I mean Joe Biden,
Yes,
because I believe what's going to happen is that we now have independent corroboration from several news agencies. Yes, the Hunter Biden laptop is real. Well, the big deal isn't going to be what did Hunter do? Was he selling influence? Was he, doing
that's
coke?
not the
Whatever.
question. You're 100%
That's
correct.
right. That's going to form the basis. Where the investigation is going to go is the big guy.
No
What
doubt.
was
The
Joe
big guy is
Biden
it.
doing with all of this? And is he compromised? Is he beholden to Chinese interests, to Russian interests? And unfortunately, I think you're going to see the answer is probably going to be yes, because there are recordings of him, from an answering machine where he clearly knows what's going on.
And he
The
says you're in the
question,
clear.
yeah, the question is, by the time the investigations get to that point, will Biden still know what's going on? Because there's no doubt his mental faculties are failing him. He may be called to testify, and his answer to everything is, I don't remember that. And unfortunately, he may be telling the truth.
He may be telling the truth, but if that happens, I know that's a kind of a comedic look at it with obviously so a lot of reality behind it. But any way it plays out, it's not going to be good for him. If he comes out and he doesn't know what day it is, it's going to just prove further solidify people's beliefs that this guy's not ready for prime time. Even with his increasing popularity, just came out in the news I think today or the other day that there's more talk about with Democratic insiders that there's and Obama operatives that he needs to move on and step aside for someone younger. And here's what I really think: Nixon, getting a little back in history, there wasn't really calls for impeachment, even with the Watergate investigation, until the economy tanked in '73 with the oil crisis. I think it's still true today, 40 years later, is that, and there's growing indicators that the economy is not looking, more talk about layoffs. They say the housing index is the lowest it's been in a decade. I think that's because it's still about the economy, stupid. If the economy was good, anyone can survive anything. But when people look at the economy, and when it's soft or in a free fall, it's every man for himself, and there's no lifeboats for someone like Biden.
Yeah, and Biden doesn't seem to understand the ramifications of the midterms. He sees, oh, the
Oh,
Republicans didn't
victory!
do
He
as
sees
well.
victory.
Yeah, he sees victory. But the fact of the matter is, even having held the Senate, he's not going to be able to ram anything through the House. So his agenda is still dead. And when you see that, he's not going to be able. Now, that actually might help him in the long run,
Oh yeah,
because
definitely. Yes.
he's
It's like
not going to be
stopping
able
someone
to.
from smoking cigarettes. Yeah,
Yes.
they don't enjoy it, but it's probably a good thing. Yes.
Because he's not going to be able to push through more ridiculous spending that may have the effect of slowing the inflation rate, because the ridiculous spending is a big, factor in fanning the flames of inflation. So
Well,
if inflation starts going down because he can't get his agenda passed, he may end up looking better.
his enemies might be his best friend in a kind of twist on a basic a poetic twist. But speaking of inflationary pressures, Mike Rowe, who I really like, dirty jobs guy, basically was saying what a tragedy is, both economically and socially, that 7 million able bodied workers, as he said, punched out of the workforce. That's also inflationary because you have fewer workers. And now you have, basically wage pressure. But what does that also mean socially for this country? 7 million punched out.
Yeah, it's a big deal. These folks have just decided, you know, they're not going to go back to work. They're living off of their savings.
And also
Now,
living off
it
over big government, because you can do the
yes,
math in Connecticut. If you were a single mother, I think with two kids, that's equal to almost, with all the benefits, $50,000. And now that study was 10 years ago.
yeah, it's a bit different now, but there is a book called The Burnout Generation. I just read this not too long ago. And it talks about how people in the workforce have been burnt out and why a lot of them are leaving the workforce. And part of it, and a major part of it, is this book interviewed millennials. And the millennials went into this workforce. They didn't want jobs like Mike Rowe showcases where they're actually building things and doing things. They all wanted to be social media influencers, and they wanted to be communications, social on social media. And when they suddenly found out they couldn't make enough money with that, the stress started getting to them. Well, because they were they were brought up getting awards for participation, and they expected the workforce to be the same way. So now you've got 7 million of these kids going, you know what, I don't want to do this anymore. I don't want to have to work. The government gave me all this money. Oh, they're gonna forgive my student loan. I won't have to
When
worry
you took
about
art
that.
history at Wesleyan,
Yes. By the way, the government's not forgiving anybody's student loans. It's been shot down by so many courts. Now it's going to go to the Supreme Court. The Supreme Court is going to say the same thing as these other courts. No, Biden does not have the ability to do this. It has to go through Congress, and the new Congress is not it's never going to pass the
zero
House.
chance of that happening. But I agree with everything you're saying, unfortunately. But isn't it really the bigger issue of the wussifying of America? I mean, 1940s, 1950s. Yeah, a lot of people, there's books. I read the books. The Man in the Gray Flannel Suit. Working for the Edna. Yeah, sometimes it sucked. Okay, your boss sucked, and you just had to put bread on the table. So people didn't say, I'm not being fulfilled. I mean, working in a coal mine, that's fulfilling as well. I mean, isn't it really, America is not the America of even 50 years ago?
It's not. And that's one of the reasons that the Democrats are for open borders, because they need to get people into this country who are willing to do the work that's necessary to keep the country running, because they don't want to do that. They don't want to work with their hands. They don't want to go into manufacturing. They want somebody else to do that. And yes, I love the term you use, the wussifying of America. But I'm flashing on a stand-up comic, Larry Miller. He was big in the 80s and 90s. And he said, we're just not the same anymore. He said, my dad held two jobs. He could fix anything, he could build. Because if I go to the bank and the dry cleaners in the same day, I need a nap.
Yeah, that pretty much sums it up. Yeah, very interesting. Not good for the economy, not good for America. And speaking of not being good for America, this is really kind of crazy. Like, if I didn't read it with my own eyes, I would think it was some kind of BS propaganda. I would think it was right wing propaganda, reflecting on the crime epidemic. But Walmart literally said that you can expect higher prices and store closures, not Usually you say that for the economy, inflation, and all that. No, due to shoplifting. Could you? I mean, sounds like something I just made up, but I didn't.
No, the crime wave has gotten out of control because prosecutors are not prosecuting shoplifters. So they're going in knowing that they
It's open
have
season.
absolute immunity up to, I don't remember what the dollar amount is, but they're going in, they're grabbing things, and
Okay, and guess what?
stores are
What
closing.
communities these stores are going to be leaving? Not Avon, Connecticut, not Beverly Hills, but inner
Well,
city
actually,
Philadelphia.
inner city Philadelphia, but a lot of them are leaving San Francisco and closing up shop. There have been stores that have been around for 50, 60 years that are going, no, that's it. We can't do this anymore. And
Yeah, because they operate on
the,
razor thin margins. You throw in a 10% shoplifting uptick or differential, that's their margin. It's check, please.
exactly. And where do you think that money to make it up is going to come from? It's going to come from the rest of us in terms of higher prices.
So, in some ways, in a kind of macabre way, the regular Joe and Jane are subsidizing crime
Yes,
with higher
that
prices.
that's exactly what's going on. And we talked about this last week where Chris Murphy came out and said, "Well, we should defund the police in terms of for communities where they're not pushing gun control." The Democrats keep going back to defunding the police. This is not working. We now have fewer police than we have at any time. I believe the statistic was the last 70 years.
With
And
a growing population.
people,
Duh.
right, with a growing population, we are not seeing people signing up for the academy, so we're not filling these positions. And the police are retiring in record numbers because they're getting tired of having a target on their back. And let's face it, that's happening all over the country, not just in major cities. We had it happen here in Connecticut, in the relatively small town of Bristol, where we had two cops targeted and killed, and it's happening all over. The
Well, you'd have to
cops
ask
are
yourself the
tired.
natural question is if you're a 20-year-old high school graduate, smart person, or college graduate, would you, why would you ever sign up for it? It's always been a thankless job. Now it's that on steroids. It just makes no sense. And the other part is if you're a 50, 55-year-old policeman, you got 2 years left to retire, are you going to actively try to stop a mugging? Or no, you, because you're going to be crucified, you could lose your pension. It's like I'm going to McDonald's and go through the drive up. I don't care. I'm done.
Actually, in most police departments, at age 57, they can already retire with full benefits by that point.
No, I'm saying if you were at
So,
55, why would you even put up with this shit?
no, no, even 55, you can walk out right there, full benefits. Why wouldn't you?
Of course.
Yeah.
Hello. No, I want to put up with this crap. Forget about it. Well, switching gears to a not more interesting, a lighter topic, but one has huge economic ramifications. And every stage, as you know, just like a caterpillar becomes a moth or a butterfly. Things evolve and change in the economic world, and I thought it was very interesting. You were talking about like how factories kind of became, the shedded, people shedded those. And now they're looking at high rises in major cities. Before the pandemic, in most major cities, there was a 95% occupancy rate. It's down to below 50. I think it's 47. And many economists say it's never coming back. So the question is, what do you do with all these high rises?
Yeah, a lot of communities are looking at these to try to convert them into apartments and condos. But if you don't have jobs in those areas, why do you think people are going to move there? The city of Hartford is a perfect example. They're trying to turn former office buildings into apartments, but there's no jobs. There's nothing to do in Hartford. So even the apartments have high vacancy rates now.
That's really interesting you said that. Is there was a time, and it's almost unbelievable now, that Hartford was this vibrant, small but very vibrant city, both economically and socially. It was a pretty cool place to hang out and a great place to work. I mean, the lifestyle of people working in Hartford and either living in Hartford or living in the suburbs was really quite awesome. And I actually read, believe it or not, Dr. Lopkin, a economic study done in the 90s by UConn, essentially giving the death knell to Harvard, basically saying it's a perfect storm of an economy based on declining and vacating areas like insurance and the military, as well as a housing base that is so depleted and so deprived, meaning Section 8, that the tax base is destroyed. So there is a point in time where a city or a region comes crosses the Rubicon to becoming beyond the point of no return. And a once great small but great city like Hartford, once called the Queen City, just like Cincinnati, I think it's done. I think the money it would take to revitalize Hartford is beyond reproach at this
Yeah,
point.
and businesses are leaving areas like this. Um, Continuing using Hartford as an example, Stanley Black and Decker had an innovation center in downtown Hartford.
Yes, in the
This
Gold Building, I believe.
and they have just announced that it is closing. They are they're shutting it down, and you're seeing this all over as more, and you're seeing it goes back to what we were talking about, the 7 million people that just dropped out of the workforce. One of the factors in them dropping out is they don't want to go back to the office. They got used to working in their pajamas and staying at home, and they want to continue to do that. And companies like Apple and companies like Tesla are saying, no, it's time to come back to the office. And rather than do that, they're dropping out.
Can
Well,
I interject? I have a question. I'm not interjecting anything. I have a question. It's kind of an obvious question, but it has huge ramifications. Okay, so you're 25, you got all the stimulus, you got the COVID relief. 25 turns to 30, and money is going to. What happens, Dr. Lopkin? Please answer this question for me. When you're 30 years old and you've been hanging out in your parents' basement or living on all this, COVID relief, uh, what happens when you have to get a job and you haven't worked in 5 years? I remember a time, if you haven't worked in a year, you are screwed. 5, 7 years, you're a good spin guy. You're a media savvy person. How do you spin that?
it's going to be really tough, but
And how about their
honestly,
futures?
if they stay out of the workforce for 5 years, they've got two options. One, they can come up with a whiz bang idea, start their own business,
With
so
no
that they can
capital.
hire themselves, but it's going to be very difficult to find capital. Or they're going to have to learn to use the phrase, would you like fries with that?
Yes, and would a sesame seed bun be better than the Kaiser roll?
Yeah, and you're going to see restaurants have had a hell of a time hiring. When these folks run out of money, that's going to be all they're qualified to do.
Well, that brings up a bigger social and psychological issue, Dr. Lopkin. So they weren't satisfied working at the Aetna or Stanley Black and Decker or Apple. How do they adjust to now? Would you like fries or would you like sweet potatoes with that burger?
Yeah,
Talk about unfulfillment
yeah,
or lack of fulfillment.
they're not going to adapt well at all. And we're already seeing an epidemic across this country of depression, anxiety, loneliness, isolation. This is only going to get worse as these folks go, well, I'm not going back to the office. Guess what? You might not have liked your office all that
It looks
much.
a hell of a lot better. It's like breaking up with that girlfriend or boyfriend, right? And they were this and that, and then 6 months later, when you're on Match.com, but guess what? They're looking a little better, aren't they, Doctor Lopkin?
But it's even more than that because people don't realize you go into your office. Okay, these may not be your best friends, but you are having social interaction with them. You go grab something for lunch. You go down to the
You
restaurant
develop,
down the
yes,
block. You
social
talk.
engagement as well
Yes,
as social and emotional intelligence. You're dealing with people. I would contend if you're living at home in your parents' basement or living on the dole for 5, 6 years, I think you get to a point that I don't think you're capable of work. I mean, physically you are, but in terms of getting along in a social environment, you are very much behind the curve.
yes. And you have to figure out ways to deal with this. And unfortunately, the folks that are dropping out of the workforce, not only aren't they dealing with it, they'll hang out with their friends because most of them have other friends that have also dropped out of the workforce.
Misery loves
But
company, yes.
right, but as time goes on, you're not going to get bailed out again. The government handouts are ending. They're done. You're
Well, it's
going
called
to
a
have
rude
to.
awakening.
Yes,
But
and it's going to be interesting to see how people deal with it.
it will be certainly interesting. I think it'll be a huge social and economic game changer. Um, well, Dr. Lopkin concludes another edition of Carnivore
Before
Radio. Great
bef-
show.
before
And
we
for
conclude,
our listeners
before
out
we
there,
can,
we can be accessed in almost any platform that respects free and engaging thought, as well as our listeners can give their input on the show, can't they?
they can, but before we sign off, there's one other story we need to talk about a little bit. And I was born in 1969, so I came of age with this show. But over the last few days, Bob McGrath has passed away. And for those of you who aren't familiar with his name, Bob McGrath was one of the original actors on Sesame Street.
Yes, I did
And
hear that.
he taught music on the show. He taught communications on the show. And this is back when Sesame Street taught how to read, how to write, to do
Oh, they don't do
math.
that anymore?
No,
Just kidding. Just kidding.
now it's so much woke, but back then, now Bob McGrath hasn't been on the show since 2017. He retired, but he was still active in the community and went to Sesame Street events to help teach youngsters how to read, how to learn. And that's something, unfortunately, we don't have a lot of people doing anymore. So, that quick tribute to Bob McGrath. He will be missed.
Agreed.
And yes, we want to hear from you. What are your opinions on these topics? What topics do you want to hear about? Go to exvadio.com, exvadio.com/connect. Let us know what you're thinking. And of course, you can catch every episode of Carnivore Bites on the Carnivore Radio website at exvadio.com/podcasts, the Apple Podcasts app, Google Podcasts, Spotify, iHeartRadio, Stitcher, Audible, Amazon Music, and other platforms that respect freedom of speech.
Thank you, Dr. Lopkin. Thank our listeners.
We'll see you next time.